Amid the dire trends of soaring cases counts and death counts across the world, South Korea has emerged as a sign of hope and a model to emulate. The country of 50 million appears to have greatly slowed the spread of this epidemic after an explosion in cases a few days ago. South Korea has reported 152 new cases today, taking the total count to 8,565. The country reported 900 daily cases at its peak on the 29th of February. Now, this has now come down to just 152 today, from 900 to just 152 in a matter of days. And it has done so without locking major cities. Even after driving case numbers down, the country is braced for a resurgence. Now, South Korea is tightening border checks for all arrivals from overseas to prevent new cases coming into the country. This comes as domestically transmitted infections are subsiding. Seoul has already imposed strict border checks on visitors from China, Italy and Iran, the hotspots for COVID-19 worldwide. Visitors are also required to download a smartphone application to track whether they have any symptoms. Now, behind South Korea's success lies the most expansive and well-organized testing program in the entire world. South Korea's health facilities are combined with extensive efforts to isolate infected people and trace and quarantine their contacts as well. South Korea has tested more than 2.7 million people so far. That is over 5,000 people per million inhabitants, which is more than any other country in the world except only tiny Bahrain. The United States has so far carried out 74 tests per 1 million inhabitants, so South Korea is far, far ahead. Now, whether the success will hold is yet unclear, but new case numbers are largely declining. The downward trend in overall infections has raised hopes that Asia's largest epidemic outside China may be abated.
Determined by the authorities to be at the center.
Bruce Harrison now joins us live from Seoul in South Korea with all the updates. Bruce, the number of cases, daily cases, has come down drastically in South Korea. What are the steps the government is taking?
Well, good afternoon from a very windy Seoul, Shobit. Well, as you briefly mentioned there, one of the government's biggest endeavors has been this massive nationwide testing scheme. They believe that the more people they test and the more transparent they are with their procedure, they can ultimately flatten the curve, as people are saying, scientists in particular, flatten the curve of the outbreak with not aspirations to eliminate the virus once and all in a single blow, but slow the curve, slow the spread. And what we've seen over the past several weeks is that that has been effective to an extent. And while the numbers are still down significantly, you had quoted a number, roughly 900 at the peak, 150 roughly now. That still marks a slight uptick from the previous 4 days we had seen here, where numbers fell below 100 each day, and that raised hopes even more. So we've seen a slight increase in the number of cases, and people are wondering what's causing these new outbreaks. Did it in fact ever go away, or was this inevitable in a nation where people live in the capital with 25 million people? Was this going to happen? Was this spread in a small country eventually going to come here to Seoul, where some of these new cases have been confirmed?
Right. Meanwhile, Bruce, President Moon Jae-in has pledged tens of billions of dollars to help small businesses during this outbreak in South Korea. Tell us more about his plans to support local economies.
Well, as the weeks have worn on, Shobit, it's become more apparent that this isn't going away, and the economy is going to struggle less in the short term, but also much longer into the future than South Korea had anticipated. So on top of a nearly $10 billion emergency package for the medical and economy reported about 2 weeks ago, Moon has now stepped up. He's going to release $39 billion in emergency funds for small and medium businesses. What this will guarantee is loans for businesses that earn up to $78,000 in annual revenue. There's also some other stimulus measures in there to try and help local economies, because the bottom line is if they don't get support soon, a lot of these businesses are going to close their doors, and it's going to be too difficult once the outbreak goes away and the economy has a chance to rebound for them to reopen their shops. So the president sees how dire the situation is, and that's why he's releasing all this money, and he hopes it will work. People just simply aren't going out right now, Shobit, and they're not spending, so a lot of shops are suffering.
For our viewers, I want to ask you one important question. Now, unlike many European countries, South Korea did not impose widespread lockdowns and instead focused on widespread testing. South Korea, like we mentioned, has one of the highest testing rates in the world. The strategy seems to be working as compared to Italy, which has recorded its daily highest death toll even after days of nationwide lockdown. So what reason did South Korean government give for not locking down the country and instead focused on testing?
It's an important question, especially if other countries want to emulate the South Korean model. As it stands, they're staying the course. There are no lockdowns. Originally, the government had said this is a democracy. It would be an unreasonable thing to ask of the public to lock down like that. The impact on families, on businesses. Ministers also suggested that locking down could even encourage a sense of complacency. People assume that if you lock down, people stay indoors, travel is limited, it's going to stem the spread. Instead, South Korea said, what we're going to do is allow people to continue to roam freely, not roam freely necessarily, but travel if they must, within certain recommendations about social distancing and washing their hands, while creating this massive testing regime to flatten the curve I had mentioned. But like I said, we're seeing a slight spike in cases in the Seoul metro area, and most of the cases were recorded when that testing scheme was focused on a church group where most of the confirmed cases have taken place in South Korea. Now that they're done testing those church members, we're seeing the number of cases fall, which doesn't necessarily suggest South Korea has beaten it, but just they have taken care of it in that specific area. What I can see, Shobit, is they're going to have to continue to track new clusters that pop up and track them hard. A lockdown hasn't been necessary so far. They're implementing stricter quarantine measures at the airport now. So we'll just have to wait and see if the spread does get worse and if the government here is willing to take those more intense steps that countries like the United States and Europe are beginning to really consider.
Bruce Harrison, I'd like to thank you for joining us. Bruce Harrison joining us live from Seoul, South Korea. After days of intense testing, finally, the curve seems to be flattening as far as South Korea's battle against coronavirus is concerned. Bruce, thank you for joining us.